Welcome everybody to Thunder Ridge Homestead. This is the third in our new series. It's called Record Keeping on the Homestead, or Homesteading Head First. It's something I always like to say when people are talking about getting started in this type of thing. Homesteading Head First means you need to do this with your eyes wide open. This is the kind of romanticized, fun hobby that people can get into where, you know, it's just, it's animals and it's gardening and it's fun and it's all feel-goody inside, and you just kind of tend to forget what the goal is in mind. Most people that I talk to anyway, when they're doing homesteading, they have definite purposes and goals, and when they're trying to explain, you know, especially to a spouse or somebody like that, what their goal is, like, oh, well, you know, we can save money and we can provide, you know, better food than we could ever buy at the grocery store, and we can do all kinds of things, you know, that would be so good. It'd be good for our family, it'd be great, and it's true, you can. Or, without knowing what you're doing and without keeping proper records, you can get yourself into where you're having to work, you know, extra hours to support this mad hobby. You start to collect animals, or maybe, you know, you start with a small garden and then you end up with, like, you know, a whole big huge giant bed full of weeds, and you don't even know what you planted where or which things grow and which things don't. And it can get to be overwhelming fast, and I say that especially if you have animals involved. Homesteading is a way of life. It's not necessarily a where you live, it's a how you live and how you think. So, you know, it's easier to not get in trouble if you have no space. You know, if you've got an apartment and your homesteading is, you know, learning to can, learning to cook, preserving food from the farmer's market, growing herbs on your windowsill, sewing, you know, doing all those type of home craft type things, you can do that and you know, have a fulfilling life and really not get into too much trouble. But if you give somebody with a mindset like mine, crazy, if you give somebody like me a few acres and the ability to have an animal or something, then you can get into a lot of trouble. You have to be aware. You have to keep records. By managing things properly, and you can be more successful. You can produce more eggs. You can produce meat from your chickens, and you can still have the enjoyment of the chickens, but you also have better animal welfare, and you have, you know, more cost effectiveness. And the more you know about what you're doing, the more you can, you know, adapt and learn, and it requires keeping records and knowing how much you paid for a bag of feed. The first part of this series, I talked about keeping track of feed costs, and we discussed my favorite little feed cost thing, which is just keeping my little feed envelope. Okay. Then in this last video we did, I discussed how something simple like a calendar can be put to use to collect data for your records. And calendars are a great way to collect data. But we're starting with basic little ideas, and then we're moving onward. You still have a reason, there's still reasons and things that you need to keep track of information, and sometimes writing it on a calendar works, and sometimes, you know, writing it on a feed envelope will work. But other times there's more information than that, something you have to keep a hold of, something you want to be able to remember. But there is a place for journaling in the homestead. And if you can keep a paper journal and really just keep track of it, you know, great. That's all you need. You just need some place to put things. I can't keep track of paper anything. I've learned that long ago. So, should I just throw the journal out of the window? No. What I do instead is I have a journal on the computer. And I'm going to kind of go through and show you how I journal, still journal, and how I keep the records and what I do with them and why I do what I do. Journaling is another method of data collection, just like writing numbers on the calendar or writing those feed receipts down on that little feed envelope that I keep flashing up here. It's all different ways of data collection, and you have to know what's going on in the homestead to make good decisions for both the animals, for yourself. Maybe you don't have animals. Maybe you're going to keep canning records. Maybe you want to put some stuff in this notebook about, you know, what you can at what pounds of pressure and where you got the tomatoes, and maybe you find out that Amish paste tomatoes make great tomato paste and cherry tomatoes make great tomato juice, which they do, and you know, you want to be able to buy them at the farmer's market later. That's a perfect place to put your journal. That's a perfect place to put this information. I have my books up here on the shelf, and I don't know if you can see. Try to get up here a little bit higher. See, I've got my little books right in there, and one of the things that's in those books that I have is I make my own soap, and I would keep some soap making recipes, and so that's a kind of journal all of its own, to just have a notebook of maybe recipes that you use, or you know, different things that you've discovered as you go along the way. So now I'm going to try to show you on the computer how I keep records and why I keep records, and this is what I do with my computer journaling. And I just, you know, you always have to name something, so I call this my grass-fed notebook. So that's what I call it. So I hope that you guys can see this well enough that you can follow me along, and I can teach you a little bit about how I keep records on the homestead. Okay, I want to welcome you guys to how I keep a journal for my records on my animals. And I keep it on the computer because, like I said, I myself personally, I've tried to journal in notebooks. I do it for a while, and then I just don't always keep up on it. To me, it's a lot easier. I can come in here into the office area, and you know, I'll do my emails during the day. You know, take care of whatever house business, pay bills, whatever you do on the computer. And it's real easy for me to just go ahead and fill out, you know, if I have a little notation or whatever to put in my grass-fed notebook, or have any records updates to keep on my rest of my stuff. So, like I said, you could do the little paper journal, but this is what I do instead. I just opened up a Windows document. I gave it a title. And the first thing that I think is the most important thing to do to get yourself started is at the beginning of every year, or at the beginning of whenever you start this journal project, I do what I call roll call. I've got a date here. Like I said, this is the 18th of January. So this is an older one, but I have in there my project, which is my Katahdin sheep. At that time I had 4 ewes and 1 lamb on this date. This is as of this date. It's like a little inventory. It says here the ewes are all hopefully bred, but the breeding was not witnessed. And that was an interesting little thing to put right there. The breeding was not witnessed, because typically speaking, when I breed my ewes, I have the ram in one pen and I have the ewes in another pen, and there is a certain day that I put them out together. On this year, the ram we had was a ram lamb. His name was Ira S, and he was born 4 of 2017. And then I gave him a description of him. He's red and white ram lamb. Okay. I purchased him. He had a purebred Katahdin mother and a registered father. And this is the date I purchased him. Okay, that's just a note that I wrote down, so I know what it is, right? And because he was a bottle baby, he was out with our sheep growing, and he got mature a lot sooner than I thought he did, so I did not see him, actually witness him breeding my sheep. So that was another lesson learned by journaling. Then I go through and I talk about each of the sheep that I have, the date that they are, the age that they are, a description, where I bought them. This one I bought actually off of Craigslist. And then other ones, if I know they're breeding, I put the breeding down on here. So like this one we raised, and it's Dot and Bob. So I know that. And I wrote that down, and I wrote a description so that anybody that would come in would be able to see and know which sheep is which just by looking at my descriptions. Then I talk about the turkeys. I had a laying flock at this point. That's what they were. And we had 2 dogs, Sage and Man Dog. And then the first notation here, that was just my, update starting whatever's going on. I usually, if I've been doing it in the years past, I'll put a little bit of something in there, like this little entry. And what this entry is, typically I usually put it in as italicized or something to make it a little bit easier to denote the difference. That's kind of a history. October the 27th of 2017, Yule and Time appeared to be in heat. So if so, they would be lambing on that day. So that's because I did not know, if you see up here, I did not know when he for sure bred the sheep. So I had to keep that notation. Then as you go along in the journaling, January 9th, dewormed the sheep today. I put the name of the sheep that got dewormed and the dewormer that I used. Okay. And the ram got a different dewormer than the ewes did because the ewes could not get the Valbazen wormer when they were pregnant. And then I gave a quick description. And then on this date, on the 24th, I did a weight tape on these girls and boys. And I did how much they weighed and so forth. January 27th, sold some hens. February the 11th, we had a lamb. And that was an interesting one to note because like I said, I didn't know when these sheep were due, and we actually had a first-time lammer, Rosemary, which was one of the sheep, and when she lambed early. I did not know that she was ready to have it. It was 20 degrees out, and when I got there, her single lamb had frozen, basically, so we had to note all of that stuff down on the information sheets. So this is where I put stuff like that. Here, March the 5th, trimmed the feet of the sheep of 2 today. And why did I only trim 2? Because I was noticing that Dot's feet were in bad shape, so I had to put a note about that. But basically, I'm just going to zoom through here and pick another thing out. Here's a note. This is when I need to deworm again. Go down here. May the 12th. Turkey eggs on lockdown, hatch on the 16th. So that's the kind of things you put in a journal, I use, if you see, I use colorful highlights sometimes. I've got, interesting notations. This is when I got my dog. And just different things. So that's all my little journal does, is my journal is just a way, and however you do it, if you do it on paper or otherwise, a journal is a way to keep track of some important information for your farm. So I hope that kind of gives you a little bit of explanation why I still journal. I do it on the computer. I do it a little bit differently than the original paper books. But a journal is an important way to keep data and keep information. Calendars, journals, and just paper data collection. Anything like that, that's three ways that I'm keeping records on the homestead so far. The next time we're going to try some of the other forms and things that I've developed over the, literally 40 years of doing this stuff. I hope that I can help somebody out there. If you have any questions about how to keep records better, or if you're having problems trying to figure out what's the best way to do it, realize everybody's different. You know, my sister could keep a little notebook and would, you know, diligently write in a little notebook every day of her life. That's just my sister. I can't do that. You have to figure out what data you need to collect, and there's a lot more than you think, and how is the way that it is easiest for me to collect it. What will work for me and what will work for our homestead. And do you want to do a whole overview, or would it be better to break it into small projects? Because it might be easier to just, you know, keep track of this one little thing. If you keep track of one little thing and get it good, then you can keep track of another little thing and get it good, and you can progress. And the more you know, the wiser your decisions will be, and the better off your homestead will be, and the better off you guys will be as far as, you know, being a success at this homestead journey. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope it can help, and I'm going to try to keep track for part 4 coming up. Thanks for watching.